I didn't like Nomadland. Trust me, I really wanted to. I followed it for months while it was playing in the festival circuit. I considered watching it stream online as part of the virtual New York Film Festival, but I decided against it because I wanted to see it on the big screen. I was excited to see a Malick-inspired drama set in the American Southwest starring Frances McDormand, who almost always gives great performances. On paper, it seemed like it would be my movie of the year, but then I saw it. And something didn't sit right with me. There was this itch in the back of my head telling me that there was something wrong with this movie, something bad. But I couldn't quite put my finger on it for a while. But now I think I understand. Nomadland is a movie set shortly after the housing crash and recession of 2007. The factory where Fern and her husband worked for their entire lives closed shop, displacing thousands of people and killing the town. Her husband died shortly after, and Fern committed to a Spartan life on the road, the life of a nomad. Let's be frank, she's homeless, wandering from town to town in search of temporary jobs, working for wages that barely last her until her next gig. Each year, around Christmas time, she works at an Amazon warehouse, which looks like a fun job from this movie's perspective. I was trying to see if there were any piss bottles in the warehouse, but unfortunately, I couldn't find any. So why didn't I like it? I think it all starts with a question. Who was the movie made for? I was the only person in the cinema watching the film, so I didn't really have any anecdotal evidence to find out who the core audience of the movie was. So I decided to go out and ask people if they saw Nomadland. Have you seen the movie Nomadland?
Not yet.
No.
I have not.
No.
No.
I have no idea what that is.
No.
I've seen the trailer. I want to watch it.
No.
Have you heard of it?
No.
It doesn't seem like they really took to it. So who did? The kind of people who go to film festivals and pay for overpriced movie tickets, who love to log their film viewings on Letterboxd, and who probably went to good colleges and live in coastal cities. People like me. People from well-to-do families who don't know what it's like to be hungry, to be without a home, to have their whole life shattered because of the closure of a factory. So maybe making a film like Nomadland is good. It makes middle, and upper-class people aware of the struggles of those without. However, maybe it's just me, but I didn't get the feeling that that was the purpose of the movie. It felt too cheery. People love to talk about voyeurism in film. Many films are centered around voyeurs. You can probably name several off the top of your head. Rear Window, Peeping Tom, The Conversation, The Truman Show, Being John Malkovich, and The Lives of Others come to mind. Voyeurism and film fit together like a hand in a glove. Film is the act of seeing and hearing into someone else's life, someone else's dreams, someone else's nightmares. Film is inherently voyeuristic. I think, though, for the purposes of this video, we can narrow our focus down from voyeurism in general to class voyeurism. Class voyeurism, the act of peering into another class, in this case through film, is not a bad thing by itself. We often live in bubbles of our own economic brackets. If you grew up in a middle-income suburban neighborhood, chances are your friends are mostly other middle-class kids. If you grew up in a poor neighborhood, chances are so did your friends. Film allows us to see outside of our everyday bubble. It expands our world. Shows like Downton Abbey and The Crown appeal to most everyone, because for most people, the lives of the uber-wealthy are alien. It provides an escape, a fantasy. And though people in the lower classes might act as voyeurs into the upper echelons of society via film, the inverse is also true. Wealthy people can often be more disconnected from the lives of working-class people than working-class people are of them. Is it immoral for an elite to peek into the world of someone who's poor? No, of course not. It can be beneficial. These films can change hearts and move people to support charities, become more generous, see lower class people as the complex and human people that they are, or try to help those in need in their communities. But for that to happen, the movies about the struggles of those on the lower rungs of society need to be confrontational. They need to treat the subjects as humans. They can't pull punches. They cannot be sanitized. Because if they try to comfort their intended audience, then they aren't on the side of their subjects. They've turned into what I call poverty porn, a film that allows wealthier people to comfortably observe a sanitized view of poverty from a distance. These are films that don't challenge the audience, but rather glorify or romanticize the state of being poor, making them feel less like pieces of hard-hitting social realism, like Kess, for example, and more like exploitation films that get nominated for Academy Awards, like films that allow us to observe the poor in the same way in which we observe animals in a zoo. Is it a film that challenges us? Or is it a film that pulls its punches to relieve the audience of any negative, intrusive thoughts? I think it's the latter.
No matter her struggles, the film portrays her as a free-spirited individual. It romanticizes the nomadic lifestyle. We see her floating peacefully in a mountain stream. It's just her against the world, driven by the kind of rugged American individualism that defines our national culture. She likes her odd jobs, and it's her right to. But her optimistic view of her situation is not shared by actual people living the nomadic lifestyle. Many elderly people, displaced by layoffs and recessions, work physical labor which often result in injuries like broken ribs and fractured skulls that the employers don't cover. Nomadland shows none of this. These elderly people who should be enjoying their twilight years in relative comfort are instead used as cheap, expendable labor. And this movie is trying to tell us that this isn't that bad? Why? This is a serious problem facing our nation's elderly, and this movie completely whitewashes it, or really just pretends that it doesn't even exist. I think that we can find an answer to this question if we dive into the film's intent. Why was it made? It all stemmed from a fantasy that Frances McDormand had. Quoting her, "When I'm 65, I'm changing my name to Fern. I'm smoking Lucky Strikes, drinking Wild Turkey, I'm getting an RV, and hitting the road." When McDormand read the book Nomadland, Surviving America in the 21st Century by Jessica Bruder, she saw a means to bring her fantasy to life on the silver screen. It's my opinion, and you may very well not agree, that the core problem of Nomadland is that it stems from McDormand and Jayu setting out to make a film about McDormand's alter ego, rather than a film about the people who actually have to live these lives. Furthermore, the way Jayu and company shot the film might register as realist to some people, but slimy to others. They used real nomads, most notably Bob Wells, Linda May, and Swanky as characters in the film. Using non-professional actors is nothing new. It was a common practice in Italian neorealist films 80 years ago, and I understand Jayu's intent. She wanted to blend fiction with non-fiction, narrative with documentary. To an extent, it works. One thing I have to give credit to the film for is how it allows the non-actors to tell their stories. They speak about what led them to the life of living on the road. These scenes are, by far, the most affecting scenes in the movie, but they're not the primary focus of the movie. Fern is. And considering where this film originated from, I can't shake this feeling that this movie is an exercise in play-acting poverty. The real people feel like background characters in McDormand's movie. They're there to flesh out the setting, more than they're there for the film to explore their ways of life and their stories. They stop being the real people they are, and they start being participants in Frances McDormand's poverty fantasy. This all reminds me of what I see as a growing cultural trend: rich people fetishizing and replicating impoverished lifestyles, albeit with a sense of glamour. Poor people have trailers, rich people have tiny homes, poor people live out of their cars, rich people live #van life. It's funny how you rarely hear of rich folk immersing themselves in lower income neighborhoods in cities like Newark or Chicago, or how they don't move to small towns in the deep south or in Appalachia. The vans and tiny homes allow them to be insular, self-absorbed, and yet get a semblance of the feeling of what it feels like to live with minimal material possessions. The aesthetic differences between these parallel ways of living are apparent at first glance, but there's a deeper difference between the two. The former is a choice, and the latter isn't. If the van life doesn't work out for the millennial urbanite, then they can go back to their cushy white-collar jobs. The lower-class person living in their car or the family living in a trailer have nowhere to go. They live paycheck to paycheck, working jobs that the rich would probably scoff at. They have no security net. It's not a way for them to find themselves. It's their life. Side note, in my experience, people without a lot of material wealth tend to be happier than those with.
That's my problem with the movie. It has the potential to bring to light the complex hardships brought onto many disadvantaged Americans by the housing crisis, but it holds back. It prefers a sanitized, fictional story of Fern to any of the raw and real stories of other nomads. It trades real social commentary for feel-good platitudes like "I'll see you down the road" that I'm sure are popular at high-end Hollywood dinner parties. But even people in Hollywood aren't buying it. Look at what Paul Schrader has to say about Nomadland and its portrayal of poverty.
Paul, would you please elaborate on what you meant about Nomadland being fake poverty? Thank you. Interested to hear your thoughts. Jason Roth, characters playing it being poor. Being really poor is another film, an unwatchable one. Shane Briggs, true poverty is bleak, unrelenting, and inescapable. The only way to commercially dramatize it is to fabricate a positive resolution. There is no positive resolution. It holds back, and so it comes across as superficial and frankly out of touch. I guess that's par for the course when the daughter of a Chinese executive makes a movie for a Disney-owned company. What came across as particularly out of touch for me though, was how this is what the Nomadland team sent to critics, when Fern and all the people like her subsist off of processed and packaged foods. Who thought that this was a good idea? It's so far disconnected, not just from the life of a nomad, but from the life of a normal American, that it crosses the threshold of out of touch into the house of offense. The chips they used? $30 a bag, $7 for the pickle slices, and $65 for the cheese. It's laughable how overpriced it all is, and the presentation looks like it's meant to fit in line with Magnolia Table, not with the people on the edge of society who live on the road. I can just imagine a bunch of rich kids in LA or New York putting this together. Really, if they wanted to send the critics a gift that was more in line with the nomadic lifestyle, they should have mailed them a bucket in which to shit. I'm not saying that I think Nomadland is a terrible film. I thought it was okay, with the sound design being the strongest aspect of the movie, but I also think that it's important to open a discussion about how Hollywood can objectify the poor, and I also think that we just need to hold Best Picture winners to higher standards. But can you believe that this is a Best Picture winner? It's the lowest grossing winner of all time, raking in only a few million at the box office. I guess you can partially blame it on cinemas being closed, and its simultaneous release on video on demand, but it begs the question that I asked at the beginning of the video. Who was this movie made for? I guess it was made for the Academy, and they can have it. I take anything by Malik over Zhao any day of the week. It's like she wants to be Malik, but she's only copying some of his technical stylings, yet gutting his style of any meaning or substance. And how can a movie that thinks that it's celebrating humanity also celebrate the atomization of communities? So yeah, it's perfect for the Academy. But I'll end this video on a bit of a conspiracy theory of mine. Let me put on my tinfoil hat for this. Nomadland is a film distributed by Fox Searchlight, which is owned by Disney. Chloe Zhao, its director, directed the upcoming Marvel film, The Eternals. Marvel, as we all know, is also owned by Disney. So my theory is that Disney did everything it could to make sure that Zhao and her film won the awards this year so that they could use the Oscar wins to market The Eternals and legitimize Marvel movies among film buffs, which they feel like they have to do after Scorsese said that they're not real cinema. They could only pull this off because this year's competition was incredibly weak. Okay, tinfoil hat time is over. So anyways, let me know what you think about my views on this movie. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Did you like Nomadland? Did you dislike it? Did you even see it? I normally don't make this kind of negative content, but I thought that this was a conversation that needed to be started. I'll leave this on a positive note and recommend some good movies that definitely do not fall into being poverty porn. Happy People, A Year in the Taiga by Werner Herzog. The Blues According to Lightnin Hopkins by Les Blanc. Bicycle Thieves by Vittorio De Sica. City of God by Fernando Meirelles and Katja Lund. Beasts of the Southern Wild by Ben Zeitlund. But as far as other Best Picture nominees goes, Minari did so much of a better job showing working class people struggling, yet making their way and building something for themselves. It's so much better, just go watch that. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I will see you all in the next video.